Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of France, conqueror of Europe, short king, long defeat. When you think of ancient rulers, you probably picture kings and queens wearing fancy robes and sitting on golden thrones. But back in the 1700s, there was a guy named Napoleon who came from nothing and took the crown by storm. He was just a normal guy. Well, maybe not that normal, because he was Corsican, which is already pretty abnormal. But even though he wasn't born into royalty, this little Corsican boy would go on to become one of the most famous military leaders and rulers in history. Napoleon was born on August 15, 1769 in Ajaccio, Corsica. Back then, Corsica wasn't part of France. It was ruled by the Republic of Pisa, but it had been occupied by France and ceded to them by treaty in 1755. So Napoleon was technically a French subject, but his family was originally from Pisa, and they had some ties with the British, which meant that when the French Revolution broke out, Napoleon found himself in a bit of a tough spot. On one hand, he had spent most of his life in France and he didn't really identify with the British, so it kind of made sense for him to side with the revolution. On the other hand, his family's connections to Britain could have been useful if he wanted to stay on the British side and get them to help restore Pisano rule over Corsica. But Napoleon ultimately decided to throw his lot in with the revolutionaries, probably because he wasn't all that keen on giving up his newfound French citizenship. After the storming of the Bastille in 1789, Napoleon joined the Paris National Guard and rose quickly through the ranks thanks to his skills as an artilleryman. In fact, he became something of a celebrity after he repelled an Austrian attack on the city in 1792, earning him a promotion to general and the respect of the revolutionary government. The same year, when war broke out between France and Austria, Napoleon led a surprise attack on the Austrians near the town of Jemmapes, winning his first victory and establishing his reputation as a military genius. Throughout the next few years, Napoleon continued to win victories against the Austrians, the Dutch, and the British, which helped him to secure his power base in France, and it was clear to everyone that he was destined for even greater things. In 1799, he staged a coup d'etat and became the first consul of France, basically making himself the dictator of the country. But despite his new position of power, Napoleon never forgot his roots. He was a Corsican, a nobody who had clawed his way to the top, and he knew what it was like to be an underdog. So he used his power to help other underdogs, the poor people of France. Napoleon implemented a number of reforms to help the poor, such as creating a national education system, introducing a metric system, and setting up a bank to help the economy stabilize. He also introduced the Napoleonic Code, a comprehensive set of laws that helped to establish order and stability throughout France. It was a brilliant piece of legislation that helped to lay the foundation for modern French society. But while Napoleon was making these changes in France, the rest of Europe wasn't exactly happy about it. They were worried that Napoleon's revolution would spread to their countries and cause chaos, so they banded together and formed the Third Coalition against him. But Napoleon didn't let that stop him. He marched his army across Europe, defeating coalition forces at every turn. In fact, he was so successful that he even invaded Egypt, where he defeated the Ottoman Empire, captured control of the city of Cairo, and established French dominance in the Mediterranean. As Napoleon's power grew, so did the opposition to him. The British, who had been watching Napoleon's rise with growing alarm, began to fund anti-Napoleon rebels in France and the rest of Europe. They hoped that by supporting these rebels, they could weaken Napoleon's grip on power and eventually overthrow him altogether. But the British weren't the only ones who were trying to take down Napoleon. The Catholic Church, which had lost a lot of power during the Revolution, was also eager to see him gone. They saw him as an enemy of religion, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get rid of him. Despite all this opposition, Napoleon managed to hold on to power for nearly a decade. But in 1814, he made a fatal mistake. He invaded Russia. At the time, Russia was ruled by Tsar Alexander I, who had been a close ally of Napoleon since the early days of the Revolution. But Alexander had grown tired of Napoleon's bullying, and he was ready to break away. Unfortunately for Napoleon, Russia was massive, with vast amounts of territory and a large, resilient population. It was also very, very cold, and as Napoleon's army began to retreat from Moscow, they were met with brutal weather conditions that decimated their numbers. By the time Napoleon's army made it back to France, they were a shadow of their former selves. With his army weakened, Napoleon was forced to abdicate the throne, and he was exiled to the island of Elba off the coast of Italy. But this exile didn't last long. In 1815, Napoleon escaped from exile and returned to France, where he raised another army and began to fight back. He managed to win a few battles against the coalition forces, but ultimately he was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo in Belgium, and he was exiled again, this time to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. And that's how Napoleon went from being the most powerful man in Europe to being a guy living on a small island in the middle of nowhere. It's a story of hubris and ambition, and the dangers of trying to change the world too quickly. Napoleon's story has lessons for all of us. Even if you come from nothing, you can still achieve greatness. But at the same time, it's important to be aware of your limitations and not try to change the world too quickly, or you might end up like Napoleon, forgotten and alone on a small island in the middle of nowhere. He died on May 5, 1821, at the age of 51, most likely from stomach cancer, although there have been some theories that he was poisoned. Whatever the cause, his death marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in European history. If you like this video, check out my series on the French Revolution. That's where Napoleon's story started, so it's definitely worth watching if you want to know more about him. You can also check out my video on Ivan the Terrible, which covers Napoleon's disastrous invasion of Russia. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an epic historical tale. Thanks for watching.